We're recording. And people are starting to log on, and we're just going to give everybody about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to log on, and then we'll start the morning scoop. All right, I was going to wait till 8:02, but sometimes my patience gets the best of me. So I'm going to go ahead and start the program. I want to say good morning to everybody. This is Morning Scoop, and I'm Gary Grotto. I'm the executive editor of the Arizona Capital Times. And today our panel is going to talk about how Arizona's career and technical education districts, which many of you know as CTEDs, can help improve the state's education attainment levels and improve the quality of life for its residents. Sponsoring this discussion today is the East Valley Institute of Technology. And with us is Dr. Chad Wilson, the school superintendent. So at this point, I'd like to just turn it over to you, Dr. Wilson, for a few opening remarks about EVIT and CTEDs and what we're doing here today.
Well, thank you, Gary. Good morning, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. As many people know, CTEDs, Career and Technical Education Districts, are districts across the state of Arizona that lean in and support workforce development in both the high school and adult space. Throughout the state of Arizona, our CTEDs work diligently with our community partners, whether it's our public high schools, our private schools, our charters, or our individuals who are out of high school, and give them an opportunity to grow in their workforce development through a number of different programs. Here at EVIT, we have over 42 different programs, all carrying with it industry certifications. And it's our belief that giving folks the ability to have an upskill and uptraining, whether it's an adult or a high school student, provides an opportunity for them and their family, unlike anything that is offered in the state of Arizona. EVIT currently services over the whole East Valley and Maricopa County, has an enrollment of both high school and adult of over 6,000. And we're looking forward to sharing more of what we and the other CTEDs can do to help build capacity in the state of Arizona to reach our goal of achieve 60 AZ.
All right, and we're going to talk about 60 AZ here in a little bit. And next on our panel, we have Dr. Rhonda Doolin, EVIT's Chief Academic Officer. And Dr. Doolin, can you just give us a little introduction, talk to us a little bit about yourself, your credentials, and anything else?
Okay. I would be happy to. My name is Rhonda Doolin. I am a native to Arizona, which I always like to say because I think it's important. Born and raised, fifth generation, and love being here and love serving the state. My background is I am a nurse, so I come from a skilled labor market. That's what I experienced my whole life. I went into nursing, and then as I started to have kids, I went into school nursing. And then once I got into school nursing, I fell in love with education. And then I began educating nurses. So I worked at EVIT in the past as their health director. And then I left EVIT and went and worked for the Board of Nursing. In the position that I had at the Board of Nursing was overseeing all the RN, LPN, CNA programs in the state of Arizona as far as their regulation goes. So I worked in that capacity for 4 years and then stepped out, got convinced to step out and go back into education and help start a bachelor's program in the state of Arizona. And then EVIT got me.
Thank you, Dr. Doolin. And our last panelist is Kevin Imes. He's the Deputy Associate Superintendent for Career and Technical Education with the Arizona Department of Education. Kevin is no stranger to CTEDs and EVIT. And so can you tell the audience about that, as you talk about your background?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, Gary. Thank you, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Doolin, for inviting me to this event this morning too. So yeah, I definitely a strong supporter the career and technical education districts. I had the opportunity in 2015 to open the newest CTED in Yuma, Arizona, and that was the Southwest Technical Education District of Yuma, STEDI. And then about a year and a half ago, I was invited to join EVIT as their external affairs coordinator and serve those students in the East Valley. Now I'm serving as the state director for CTE. We have in the state, Gary, about 156,000 students that are involved in career and technical education. And that's probably about 44% of those high school students that are enrolled in a secondary school, public school district within Arizona. So we're about 44% and trying to spread the word, the relevancy. The one thing that CTE has that probably a little bit of a different mission is, one, we're obviously public high school, but our mission is to be able to prepare students for a skilled workforce and be able for them to demonstrate skills to earn a certification, industry certification, as Dr. Wilson alluded to, and then ultimately to promote the economic development for the state of Arizona and the United States. So thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all for joining us. And I just want to remind the audience before we begin that I have the chat open. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please submit them through the chat. And, you know, I like it, it helps to move the conversation along, and it helps, you know, with the audience. We like the audience participation. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. So just to get started, let's start off with you, Kevin. And we did this last time. We had a EVIT morning scoop. You know, just give us a little bit of history on CTEDs. I mean, they haven't been around that long. And where did they come from, and what role do they fill in the state's education portfolio?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary. Well, you know, I'm proud to say that they started 30 years ago, over 30 years ago with EVIT. EVIT was actually the first, at that time was called a Joint Technical Education District. The J in that was because there's a relationship with the students' local education agency or their local high school, as well as now what we know is the CTED. And so students would attend or do attend their local education agency, their high school, either part of the day, and then they'll attend the CTED either in the morning or the afternoon. There's 14 CTEDs in Arizona. They cover everything from Kayenta to Cochise, from Yuma to Kingman, and everything in between. So we're very geographically dispersed, and all 14 of them have a unique mission in serving the local needs of those students for which that are in their geographic area. So CTEDs are a program of choice. So not all students, unlike the core curriculum for which they would be required for graduation, students have a choice to be able to attend a career and technical education district. And that automatically tips the scale in one regard, that they've shown an interest in their educational learning. So the counterpoint to that is that we're still working on getting the word out of what career and technical education is and what CTEDs are. Often the first reaction that I have when I'm talking to people about CTE is, boy, I wish I knew about that when I was in high school. Or, you know, how do I get, what are the next step for my son or my daughter or my niece or my nephew? So they're a program of choice. So students are specifically interested in anything from cyber criminology to welding. They're not your traditional vocational education pathway, which we've come to know earlier before the CTEDs existed. But now we're practicing and becoming more nimble, more flexible in order to be able to meet those economic needs. But it all centers around student interest and the capacity to be able to provide those classes and those programs for those students.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan, or thank you, Kevin. Dr. Wilson, you had mentioned achieve 60 earlier. So that's Arizona set a goal in which 60% of the state's working adult population, and that's 25 to 64, will have a certificate, a license, or a degree by 2030. So how are CTEDs contributing to this goal?
So I think CTEDs can play a vital role in achieving that goal. I think where we're at as a state, as we march towards 2030, is that we're trending in the wrong direction in relationship to hitting that goal by 2030. And so I think CTEDs can lean in and really help shape the opportunity for students, both high school and adult, to achieve not only an industry certification, but in some cases, as in the case with EBIT, pursuing an associate degree that allows them to not only have the industry certification, but to have that training that gives them the ability to take another step up in the workforce development. One of the things we think here and believe at EBIT is that we change lives by loving our students and serving our communities. And what that means is we look for all kinds of ways to lean in and support those that desperately need it, whether it be high school or adult. We know as a state, there's a lot of water we need to put in the lake in order to achieve the goal. And we believe that the more streams that are feeding that lake, the faster the lake will fill. And I think CTE, CTEDs, as Kevin said, are an institution, an organization, an entity across the state of Arizona that truly can lean in and help support achieve 60, either by the industry credential, the license, or in some cases with some CTEDs, the associate degree.
Now, in prepping for this, I found it interesting that, students that go to CTEDs or that attend CTEDs are more likely to graduate. Am I correct? Or more likely to go on and go to college?
Yeah, I don't think there's any mystery in that, Gary. And we're, as CTEDs, we're proud of it. I think and Kevin will know the specific data, but our graduation rate, I want to say as CTEDs, is somewhere in the middle to high 90s, where the state of Arizona is in the mid 70s. At EBIT's case, 2/3 of our students, upon completing the program, pursue a post-secondary degree, whether that's an associate's or a 4-year degree. And the magic in it there, Gary, is we've known this as educators, and sometimes it's hard to make the intention a reality. If you get a student engaged in something that they're passionate to learn about, he or she will do just that. They'll thrive and they'll learn, and they'll demonstrate that they have the aptitude and the ability. I think tragically, sometimes students, whether high school or adult, are never connected to a passion, and that never gives them a purpose. And I think at EBIT, we say, if you get a passion, a purpose, we're going to help you get a paycheck. And I think that says for CTEDs across the state of Arizona.
But it's not just a paycheck either. I mean, you've told me that story before, that anecdote about the young man who struggled with math until he got to, got in carpentry class or something where he had to use math.
100%. I mean, when learning is application based versus regurgitation, it's amazing how deep learning occurs. And so the story of the student in construction who struggled at math at their high school, their home high school, that came to EBIT and magically was doing math, because math is a part of the construction industry. I know Dr. Doolin has experience in that same sort of arena in the health sciences. But I think it is, if you give students a purpose for what they're learning and it becomes application versus regurgitation, the learning is deeper, and it's also more meaningful to the student. I don't know, Dr. Doolin, if there's examples in the health sciences that you'd like to share.
Of course. I mean, of course, the one that I always love is when we talk about health sciences and truly nursing, you have to be able to do dosage calculation, which is algebra. So you have to know how to do algebra, and you have to be able to put it to the test. And, when I'm working with students, I often tell them, you have to understand you can't get 80% on your dosage calculation test. You have to get 100%, because it's not okay that you're only given meds correctly 80% of the time, because that can lead to fatalities, right? That's something. So you have to be able to do the math, the algebra for those dosage calculations, not only well, but to perfection. And once they kind of understand that, and they understand the application of why it's so important, they're more willing to learn the algebra or the concepts behind it, or how I do this. I always joke, though, that our students are different nowadays than they were in the past. Lots of times we'll get students on dosage calculation who will come up with an answer of they're going to administer a patient 50 teaspoons of something. And I sit there and go, do you know what a teaspoon is? And I've come to find out they don't know how to cook. They've never had to be in the kitchen and had to cook before. So even some of those little things of, we get out the teaspoon and we say, okay, here's the medication bottle, pour out 50 teaspoons, and about after when they get about 25, they're like, yeah, I guess I wouldn't do this, would I? I said, no, you wouldn't do that.
So let's talk about, adult education a little bit. And, when you say school choice, you think of K-12. That's usually the context that where we hear it, but there's school choice in post-secondary now. So can you talk a little bit about that? You've got your community colleges, with their bachelor's degrees, and CTEDs has something new as well, right?
Yeah. So CTEDs have the opportunity to pursue offering associate degree in certain programs. And one of the reasons the CTEDs pursued that opportunity is because we believe we have we are uniquely prepared to lean into and support students who potentially don't have that same kind of support in other institutions. When you look at some of the wait lists and some of the programs at some of our public institutions, students that want to pursue there may have to wait quite a long period of time in order to participate in that learning. And we believe that we have the resources, we believe we have the expertise to help lean in and support some of the needs in the state of Arizona. Dr. Doolin has been instrumental in helping us champion the associate degree, and so I'm going to turn it over to her. But I think at the end of the day, part of what we believe is that, like I said at the beginning, that for us as a state to become who we expect ourselves to be, it can't be driven by one or two or three institutions. It's got to be driven by the collective of the whole. And I think sometimes as a state, we have been so protective of our fiefdoms that we've not provided the opportunity to the students that they deserve. And I think here is an example of ways in which we as a state can really be creative and give students and adult, high school and adult, that post-secondary experience through CTEDs. And that, Rhonda, if you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like, I think it'd be helpful.
Sure. One of the things that really came to mind as I worked with EVIT is if anyone has not had the chance to see EVIT's facility, I highly recommend it. But as I walked through the facility and I got to see all the different areas, things started to dawn on me. Taxpayers have paid and contributed to CTEDs. The equipment is state of the art. It's amazing what is being offered to these high school students. But the reality is all the high school students are off of our campus at 2:30 in the afternoon. Well, that is a huge valuable resource in the state of Arizona that we can use to educate adults. After 2:30, what are we doing with all this state-of-the-art equipment? The welding equipment is here. Why are we not giving those adult learners the opportunity to come in and get the welding certificates that they need to be productive citizens or to upscale or get a new job? But the same was in the health arena. I mean, EVIT has a state-of-the-art simulation lab. I mean, it's fantastic. Better than many of the facilities I saw when I worked for the Board of Nursing and the other universities and other state schools that the high school students were being able to use, the EMT students here were being able to use, but we weren't using that equipment to the best of its ability for the state. And so one of the things I challenged was, why can't we? Why can't we? We have the buildings, we have the resources, we already have most of the instructors because they're already teaching here. Why are we not expanding to the adult learners, and why are we not expanding in those high needs areas to the associate degree so that we can provide surge techs, that we can provide paramedics, that we can provide nurses, we can provide welders, we can do all of those things that are needed to fill that gap. And Dr. Wilson always says more streams to the lake will fill the lake faster. And so this is just another stream that in the reality is economically to the state is a nice solution to not have the equipment just sitting here, but being used for those adult learners.
And you're talking about the associate degree, correct?
Yes, yeah. So and and not just the associate degree. We have adults who come and just get certifications as well. Not every adult learner that comes here is getting an associate's degree, but there's some fields that require an associate's degree, like surge tech. Their accreditation of the surge tech requires now an associate degree. It used to not, but now they've changed that you have to have an associate degree. So in order to continue to offer the surge tech that we've been offering for the past 10 years as a certificate program, we had to be able to offer the associate degree to even keep going with the pipeline we had already created. Same with nursing. To be an RN, the minimum level is an associate degree. So in order to do that, we had to have the ability to award the associate degrees to pursue those opportunities.
And I think, Gary, one of the things that we believe was potentially a value-added asset is that we hear all the time, and I think the narrative is changing, but for so long, the narrative was, well, all kids have to go to college. And we know that isn't necessarily true, but we know it's also difficult to change that narrative. And so one of the things that we believe would be helpful too is to talk to parents, talk to students and say, look, if you want to come to EVIT and get certifications in welding, you can take those certifications and you can go straight out into the workforce and you can have a good living. But if you want to pursue a post-secondary degree, stay with us and get the associates. And so it's our hope that it's not an if, then, or an or, it's a combined. And I think in doing that, we have a greater opportunity to attract students and families that historically maybe wouldn't have thought about EVIT or a CTED, because now we're offering both. And I don't know, Kevin, if you're seeing some of that shift across the state in the position you're in or not.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that the paradigm of going to college was well planted in our community, our culture. But I do think that the pendulum is swinging back and people are realizing the value of certifications. And so, but I did want to comment just briefly on Dr. Doolan's the sound use of fiscal resources. You know, that's a great example of the way that we are responsible, CTEs, CTEDs are responsible for taxpayer money. And that's being able to maximize either our facilities or our equipment in other ways. And so what EVIT's done is they've tapped into the need of that continuation on an education for students. They start with oftentimes with those students on their campuses where they're feeling comfortable, and then they make that transition, you know, into an associate's degree in a familiar environment, and one that is exactly like they would find in industry. I think Dr. Doolan's point about the equipment and the resources they find on the campus, the intent is for those students to be able to walk right out of the classroom, right out of the lab, right into industry without noticing any different, and being able to say, hey, you know what, I just got certified on that, or I just used that, or I just taught my other classmates on how to use this. And so I'm skilled in using this piece of equipment or understanding that particular concept too. So I just wanted to highlight that wonderful aspect one of the sound fiscal use of resources, and then two, recognizing the continuum that students are in the journey as they progress from through the articulation of their educational journey into an associate's degree.
Dr. Wilson, what's the profile of, you know, your high school CTED student, and what's the profile of your adult population?
So I'll be honest, Gary, that's one of the things that I've been in EVIT now, I think 4 or 5 years. And one of the things that was most surprising to me as I spent more time here is our profile is the profile that you see in the state of Arizona. You come onto our campus and you will see students that are representative of every demographic, every ethnicity, every language, every socioeconomic. And that's one of the beautiful things about EVIT and about CTEDs is that in many cases, it gets students off their home high school campus in which they've spent the majority of their life around kids that are in many ways just like them. And they come down to the central campus and they're in a classroom with kids. Some are darker, some are lighter, some are richer, some are poorer. And they have to learn to problem solve. They have to learn to collaborate. They have to learn to team build. And what I find is it's that opportunity in many ways that provides value added in ways I don't think people recognize. Because when you graduate from high school and you move on to experiencing life in the great state of Arizona, many times life isn't reflective of what you experienced at high school. It's very different. And at the centralized campuses, we're representative of that. It's the same thing with the adults, although a bit different in the adult, in that what we're finding is that our adults oftentimes are individuals that are currently employed, but want to get uptrained or upskilled. And so we oftentimes have individuals in the adult arena who are representative of a demographic just like high school, but are wanting more, but aren't necessarily sure where to go to get more. And they come to us and we lean into them, we support them, we love them, and we give them the opportunity that they're needing and looking for. And what's so amazing too, Gary, and I'll stop, is that when that happens, we believe it changes the trajectory of that person's life in a real meaningful way. But as educators, we know that if you change the trajectory of an adult and he or she has children, you've also just changed the trajectory of that child's life. And so when you start talking about what are some statewide systemic approaches towards changing the trajectory of communities and the trajectory of states, CTEDs, EVIT can lean in and help support that in ways that I'm not so sure many others can, to be truthful.
Do you have some examples of some of that upskilling that people are seeking?
Sure. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Doolan and she can give the examples.
So we actually have quite a bit of that occurs, and it just depends on what area somebody might be in. So we have lots of people who are in construction trades that will come back to our welding program to get the welding certificate because they see the job opportunities with the welding subcontractor that they might not be seeing where they're currently placed. So we do see a lot of that, and EVIT does have, I believe, the largest welding facility in the state of Arizona. So it's really quite remarkable, and we get a lot of welding students. That's one of our bigger programs for the adults. The other areas, we have a lot of CNA adults that are working as CNAs who are coming to our LPN program. I would say roughly 75% are working as CNAs or have worked as a CNA prior to coming to upscale to get that LPN, because they realize that job security, that jump, that increased responsibility, and the ability for some of their employers are looking at it. They can't find nurses. So what a better way for them than to help them become the LPNs. LPNs largely work in our long-term care facilities, which in the state of Arizona, you can imagine is very much needed. We have a high elderly population and we need those workers. So we do see a lot there as well of our coming back to get that upskilling place. The other area that we see a lot is cosmetology and estheticians. We'll see a lot of moms or people who are working in different areas that are coming back saying, I've always wanted to be a cosmetologist. I've always wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to be an esthetician. We even have some that are coming to do it because they want to open a med spa. They have a degree in something else, but they want to have that understanding so that they can then do permanent makeup. They can do the esthetician. They can do eyelashes. They can open their own med spa. So the sky's really the limit, as a lot of the people who graduate from EVIT, the adults that come back, are going to open their own business. They're looking for the ability to open a small business or open their own area of their expertise.
How long does it take to get a certificate? Just welding, for example. I want to be a
One semester.
one semester.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
the way we have it blocked for our adult program is they come 4 hours a day and they can get all of their certifications in one semester.
Well, that's not too bad.
Nope.
So now let's see here. Let's talk about that associate degree some more. So first you had to change the law, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. And that was, an effort that took a number of individuals to get across the finish line. And we're really grateful for those who supported us, because by statute, CTEDs couldn't offer an associate degree, and now they can. And so that required a legislative change. So like I said, we're very grateful for that. The challenge of the associate, though, is not over yet. We talk about, we're planning to start our first associates in January, and we're going to roll out hopefully 2 more before the start of August, before August. So we'll have 3. And we're really confident that the opportunity we're going to provide students is going to prepare them for the industry that they're interested in. Some of those individuals, though, might want to pursue rolling that associates into a bachelor's. And in there becomes another challenge that we have if we want to do what's in the best interest of our students. Dr. Doolin has been working hard to try to figure out a way around that. But I think understanding what that challenge is and understanding why that matters is important for all of us, but it's also the next step we have to take in terms of the articulation and accreditation. I don't know, Dr. Doolin, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, this is one of those areas that's really hard, and it's hard not only in our state, but it's hard nationally. And that's because the ability to take credits is always up to the receiving institution. That's how it works right now. So I'm just going to use an example. And I'm going to use my own kids because that's the best way for me to explain it. I learned the hard way. I had my oldest child did a lot of dual enrollment, did a lot of AP classes, and had a lot of the credits. The problem was my child was set on a track to go to school, not in Arizona. She was going to school in Utah. So we paid for the dual enrollment. We paid for all of these credits. And even though we had the credits through the Mesa Community College system, those credits did not transfer to Utah because Utah gets to choose what they will accept from as a receiving school. Well, that same thing happens within our state. Even though English 101 is roughly can be pretty much through AZ transfer, we can align everything. It doesn't always guarantee unless there's an agreement reached on the front end that those credits will transfer everywhere. So I had to do a lot of education when I came to EVIT about post-secondary and how the transfer of credits is really, really limited. And it's really limited, in my opinion, because people are protecting their fiefdoms. Because we want, what that creates is students run out of financial aid. Because if I've taken credits and then they won't transfer, I have to retake those courses. And every time you switch schools, you lose credits. And we've learned that the majority of students do not stay at one post-secondary institution throughout their college career. So many times they're repeating things because we don't have a smooth line in the nation. It's not just in the state. AZ Transfer's done a lot of work in the state to try to align things, but even then it's not aligned. The example I'll give you is our firefighting program here at EVIT. They had roughly, when I came in, and they were very excited that they had something like 32 dual enrollment credits. But as I dove into what those dual enrollment credits were, they didn't all align to a program or a tract, meaning they were classes, but they weren't part of their program of study if they wanted to be a firefighter. And so I researched where those credits would go. And what I found is there was only one university in the state of Arizona that would accept the credits. And the only degree program it aligned to was a management and I think it was environmental systems management. Well, if I asked the fire kids, how many of you want to be in environmental management? The answer was very, very few. So they were using their dual enrollment credits. They were potentially using financial aid for dual enrollment in different places, but it wasn't aligned to a program. And so that causes undue stress on the student, the family. You pay more money, more time, and you don't have a smooth transition. The easiest way is to go into a program and have it aligned for you. I want to hope that our state will get there where we will be more accepting of credits elsewhere. I can tell you that there was a position statement in 2021 that was developed by the American Association of Collegiate Registrars, the admission officers, the American Council of Education, and the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, that all asked if institutions would change the way that institutions needed to change the way they were accepting credit. And the reason for that was so that we would get rid of the undue stress on the student and the repeating and repayment and running out of financial aid. A huge issue is to have all of the debt related to college education. And when we make students repeat things, that increases their debt. So one of the things that this statement said is that the award of credit should not be denied based on the type of accreditation of the sending institution, provided that the institution's accreditor is and remains recognized by the Council of Higher Education Accreditation or the U.S. Department of Education. Basically, what's that saying is any institution that's recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, those credits should be able to be transferred anywhere within the United States to another institution that is also accredited by the U.S. Department of Education. That's not currently happening. So for us in our associate program, that's probably the biggest challenge, is we can award the credits, but then who will take those credits? And so we're doing some affiliation agreements to make that happen.
And I think where this becomes a problem is the experience that we've had so far is that we have affiliation agreements of institutions that will accept our credits. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Doolin, all of the affiliation agreements thus far are with private institutions, not public.
Correct.
And so in some, it's mind-boggling to me that a private institution will take a look at our accreditation, take a look at the work we're doing, and they will accept the credit and they'll accept the student, and the public won't. And that doesn't seem like a huge issue, other than the cost of the private is 2, 3, 4, 5 times what the cost is of a public. So as a state, we're sitting here saying we have a pipeline back to the rivers filling up the lake in which we can get adults, high school and adults, industry certifications, licenses, move them on to an associate's. Oftentimes we see students, once they have the associates, they want to pursue a bachelor's, and to matriculate them to earn a bachelor's degree. Currently, our students have to go to a private institution, not a public, because the public won't recognize our accreditation. And to me, that is not what's in the best interest of the state.
Now, this problem hasn't always been there, right, Dr. Doolin? It came about in 2019, around there.
No, the problem's always been there. The statement came out in 2019 urging post-secondary institutions to in a way, stop protecting the fiefdoms to make it easier for students to transfer credit, because that's increasing the national, the debt, the student debt. We talk about student debt and student debt relief. A lot of the student debt relief is because, one, we've used up our FAFSA for taking credits in high school that don't apply to any program of study, right?
Right.
So you've used up some of your monies that are available to you. And two, we're not allowing the transfer of credit. Everybody gets, each receiving school gets to decide what they're going to take and what they're not going to take. It's not even seamless in the state of Arizona. If you look at AZ transfer, there are some courses that you can take that ASU will take, but U of A won't. Or there's some that U of A and NAU will take that ASU won't.
You know, Gary, the industry of education is very slow to change. And so we're locked into paradigms based off of tradition. And one thing that CTEDs have done is help to move that paradigm out of the traditional classroom into a career and technical education center. Now they're trying to change the paradigm of out of the career and technical education center into post-secondary work. So the effort to be able to create a smoother, a more common sense approach of how students move through their educational experience comes up against all these traditional blocks for which people have operated for centuries. But what now we're finding is that business and industry are saying, you need to be, again, and I mentioned this before, flexible and nimble. And so much so, if you're not, then we're going to go someplace else in order to be able to train or upskill our employees. The things that what EVIT has done is they've recognized this fact. They've recognized, one, that they need to provide the certifications to be industry ready, but they also recognize that we need to get out of this way of thinking that's been so traditionalized and be able to break down those barriers. Because as Dr. Doolin said, that the pathway isn't a linear pathway. That students and individuals go in and out of the educational environment based off of, one, their needs, two, and however they can, the education and the economic needs of our communities. And so we need to break down those pathways. And this is a perfect example. They're trying to move forward. Organizations are going to be doing one or two things. They're either growing or they're dying. And EVIT's recognized the fact that if we're going to continue to move, we need to grow. We need to grow in ways that meet the needs of our citizens and meet the needs of our business and industry. And it's just not through that traditional pathway that we've always come to know.
So we've got a education industry that's slow to change, and you've got this issue with the credits. And I brought this up the other day when we were, just chatting, and you had quite a response, Dr. Wilson. But how do you get around this? And
so can I jump in?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to let Dr. Wilson answer. But one thing, because my experience has been in the private post-secondary arena as well. And I keep telling the publics, if you don't learn how to bob and weave, the privates will. They move faster. And so that's the struggle I have, is EVIT is a public institution that's offering something, but we're trying to get our public partners on board. The privates are more than willing to bob and weave with us.
So I think, Gary, it goes back to what I've said a couple of times, not only today, but before, that, we foundationally and fundamentally believe at EVIT that we change lives. And I think when you anchor yourself to something like that, you have the courage to go down the road that others may not. And those aren't just words that we put on a wall. It's actually the walk that we take, and we do that by loving our students and serving our communities. And I think we're rooted in a foundation that gives us the courage to say, whether it's because we will outperform other entities, whether it's because we will outmarket other entities, whether it's because we will work to change legislation to allow what is in the best interest of our students in our state to occur, we're open to all of it. I believe our product will demonstrate that there is value in accepting our transfer credits, whether you're a private or a public. But I also think that at some point in time, if our product is as good as I expect it to be, and that isn't received, then we'll pursue other avenues, simply because at the end of the day, we're going to do what's in the best interest of our students, in the best interest of our taxpayers, in the best interest of our state. And that is us being able to offer the associates and those credits being accepted by not only the private, as Dr. Doolin indicated, but also the public institutions.
Hey, Kevin, on a statewide level, are CTEDs jumping on the associate's degree bandwagon, or is it just the big ones like EVIT and
each one of the beauty of each one of the CTEDs around the state is they're serving their local needs. And so each one of the CTEDs are unique, but operating under the same system of the educational system. But what EVIT has found is that they've had the population right now to be able to support this. And I think a lot of it, again, comes down to perception. They have a collective community that understands to be able to do this in order to be able to progress within your skills and your profession. And so they've recognized to be able to do that. Quite honestly, I think that some of the other CTEDs are waiting to see. But some of the other CTEDs are moving in different directions that meet their local needs. So if you go to Tucson, you're talking about collaboration with the community colleges and apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. So each one of the CTEDs are serving the local needs. And I think EVIT recognizes that this is a place for them to be able to, a lane for them to be able to move.
and just one or two more questions about the associate's degree. Now, right now, you're offering it for paramedics, surgical. No,
Only
we're not.
Surg Tech.
Yeah, we're going to start
Oh.
surgical technologies in January. And
Okay.
then at some point, we'll offer the paramedic, and at some point the RN, and at some point, hopefully, a project management to support and our industrial trades.
And why those three? Is it because, as Dr. Doolin was describing your campus, you got all this equipment that the taxpayers have paid for, and you're trying to, put it to good use, or, is this what you're getting from the community, the business community, that they need this?
So I think it's all of that, Gary. I think that, part of the requirement for the associate degree is to offer the associate in in-demand areas. And so what we lean into will be the areas that the state of Arizona says they need some help in getting that lake filled. All right. And we're one of the streams. But as Dr. Doolin said, also the resources we have are uniquely positioned to be able to support programs like surgical technologies, programs like paramedic, programs like RN, programs like in our industrial trades. And oftentimes too, it's conversations with our industry partners. I'm going to ask Dr. Doolin to share part of the industrial trade desire for project management through our construction program as an example. And this came from our industry partners that give us direction in many ways for what our next step should be.
So when we met with some of the industry partners around construction trades, largely these were the larger general contractor in the state. One of the things they said is they have a great pipeline from ASU and others in the state for their construction engineers and their construction managements. They have lots of those great quality candidates. Lots of them will bring them out as they're ending their time to do internships with them. But what we're hearing from them is what they're missing is the superintendent. They need the superintendent who's in the field, that's overrunning the crews, seeing the subcontractors come and go, that not only knows how to swing a hammer, but knows how to manage people and manage the job site, and has a little bit more behind them. And that's where they're asking us to look at this associates and project management for those construction trades, is because that's where one of their great needs is in that middle section, where they need people who have the experience of actually being certified in the trade and having those skills, but they also need them to have a little more business understanding, management, and leadership as well.
Gary, I also want to address your question, because that was a really good question as to why they decided to start where they're starting. And it's not arbitrary. It's not a place to think, oh, you know what, we'll go and we'll pick that one. So there's 4 really specific criteria for which that decision is based. One is resources, and we've talked about that. Do you have the resources in order to be able to train our citizens and our students to be able to acquire those skills? The second is that, do you have a teacher? Do you have the professionals within the industry to be able to come in and teach and deliver that curriculum in order for those students to learn? The third thing is there student interest? Is there a community out there that's choosing, again, because we talked about that a little bit before, choosing to come because they're not going to start a program for which there's nobody going to attend? And then finally, and what Dr. Doolin was referring there, is there a place for those students to go? So all of the programs basically at CTE and CTE unit at ADE are all developed based off of that criteria. Right? Is there an interest? Is there business partners? Is there qualified staff? Are there resources in order to be able to do that? And we look to our labor market analysis to be able to fill in a lot of that data. But again, I just wanted to go back to your question because it's not arbitrary. There's a critical thought process that goes behind making those decisions and what those programs are.
All right. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up was the Arizona Education Economic Commission. Now, your boss had a press conference about that the other day or 2 days ago. Can you tell us about that and what it's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very, very exciting. So it's the Arizona Education Economic Council, and those words are carefully selected because 1, it's about Arizona. 2, education is the first E in that because we know that it starts with there, and we contribute to the economic, and then it's a commission. It's not a council, it's not a committee, it's a commission, and it's a public-private partnership, a true public-private partnership. So in one sense, it's driven a large part by our industry partners. Just as I was going back before, that the qualifications were, the criteria for which we determine a program, a lot of this is based off of what our industry is telling us. This is a huge paradigm shift of getting business and industry into education. For so long, they lived in separate silos. Business would do their thing, education would do their thing. Now we know that it's a symbiotic relationship. And so what the commission is doing is inviting these very high level CEOs, CEEs of these C-suite executives to make these decisions on how our CTEDs can deliver a product in order for them to be able to meet their needs. We had a gentleman, Raytheon, and they're losing $40 billion a year because we don't have a skilled pipeline of employees to enter into that business to be able to, because they have to export the talent from someplace else or go outside our state in order to be able to bring that talent or make that product or do their business. We just don't have the skilled workforce. I think in Tucson alone, they're losing $16 billion. And so they're in a critical need to be able to produce or tap into a talent pipeline in order to sustain themselves. And again, either grow or decline, but they know that 1, there's a critical urgent need. We call it an acute need and a chronic need in order to be able for that talent to enter those industries. So it's this AEEC is a private-public partnership industry led by this commission through a relationship between our 14 CTEDs from around the state to our business and industry. And we're listening at the Department of Education. We're listening to what our industry needs, and we're listening to our CTEDs and what they need or for them to be able to produce this pipeline. I want to give a great example. We had the superintendent, Ron Sosi from Cayenta. He's up in the Four Corners area, and this was an epiphany to me, Gary. We went around the table. The way that the meeting was laid out is that we went around the table and each one of the CTEDs spoke and each one of the businesses spoke. And Ron from the Four Corners area mentioned the natural wonders that we have within our state, Monument Valley, particularly to that area. And so the CTED is recognizing that there's a desperate need for hospitality and tourism. One thing that I would never even think about in order to be able to serve and grow that economic development within that region. And so they're telling businesses and industry, this is what we see. And they're also seeing the same thing. And how can we come together in order to be able to meet each other's needs to promote that economic development in that area? So it's extremely exciting work. One, it's coming from the top down. Our superintendent understands that the student achievement is greater when students are in CTE programs. As Dr. Wilson had alluded before, students that complete a CTE program, we have a graduation of 96.4%. So if you complete a program, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to graduate high school. Now we've got to select performance indicators to make it above that. It's kind of a little hard, but we are doing very well in order to be able to meet those academic challenges, and Superintendent Horn knows that. He understands the complex situation around education and business and industry, and so therefore the commission has been developed under the leadership of Edward Coda in order to be able to provide each side their needs.
Who are some of the, you said that all of the CTEDs are involved, am I correct? Yeah. Who are some of the private sector partners?
Yeah, Raytheon, as I had mentioned, TSMC. We have a partnership with the largest employment provider in the state of Arizona, Banner. Banner was at the table. Lucid was at the table. Lucid Motors was at the table. But I also want to mention U-Haul. U-Haul was at the table too. So we not only recognize the sexy, glamorous cyber criminology, or all those systems design and clouding and all those things, but we also recognize that there's a spectrum that are needed. And now, so we have U-Haul was at the table. So I think Honeywell will be invited to the next event. And so we're picking, and we're also picking, thank you for asking this question, we're also picking those industries that represent the geographic needs from around our state. So the mining industry was represented at the table because geographically that's very important to a particular part of the state. So we're hitting regions and major industry leaders within each one of those regions in order for this commission to be able to work.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So we got about 7 minutes left or so. I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience. So the first one.
So, hey, Gary, if you could, on those
Yes.
questions, there's 3 there. Could you give the first one to Dr. Doolin, the second one to Kevin, and I'll take the third?
Sure. So the
Thanks.
first one to Dr. Doolin, you said?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so does EVIT and other CT districts allow, promote, and expanded virtual classroom around the state in unison with other CT districts? And what programs would be the most available, and what would be the cost?
So right now, that is not happening to my knowledge, but it is something that we've talked about multiple times as the CTE superintendents have met, that we're looking at to consolidate some of those hard to find resources to be able to teach some of the classes virtually. I will tell you that there are some programs, some areas, CTEDs, that do this very, very, very well with their community college partners. And that would be the ones in Cochise. Cochise has done virtual CNA instruction for eons. I mean, they were one of the very first to do it, and they do it really well. And they partner with their high school districts, and the instructor from the community college teaches it, and then assists the CTED there with executing it into all of the classrooms across the Cochise, which is, it's a bunch of small towns. You have St. David, you have Tombstone, all of those small towns. It gives them an opportunity to get that education at their home high school. So that is one that's doing it really well, and I think is a model for us as a state to look at, but also the CTEDs to come together and be able to look at what are some of those courses that it's harder to find an instructor that we could maybe partner with to do a really good job virtually. Virtual instruction does tend to be a little bit harder, as we saw through COVID with that high school age. They tend to not do as well. So that is a concern that we have to keep in mind as we look at growing that.
All right, let's go on to the other question then. So Kevin, we keep hearing, we keep hearing about higher education and the importance, et cetera. How are you working with the university, college systems to help change the conversation?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So two things I want to mention. Right now, our CTEDs have a very close relationship with their community colleges. Out of the 14, I think there are 12 that have programs on the local community colleges. In fact, there's 2 CTEDs, all of their programs that they offer are on their local community colleges. And it goes back to that resource question that we were talking about and the sound responsible use of fiscal resources. So there's already a relationship, a very collaborative relationship between some of the CTEDs and their local community colleges, because those students are being taught by a local community college instructor, receiving dual credit. They're on the community college campus, and then most likely they're able to, those students are familiar with the environment that to go on to post-secondary education because they've taken some of those classes there. But I want to go back to the AEEC concept and what we were talking about just a minute ago. And who I didn't mention that was also present there were the community colleges, as well as Grand Canyon University. I don't think it's a secret that Grand Canyon is a very progressive, very innovative university. They recognize that through their leadership, they need to dip down and cast the net wide. And so they're at the table as well in order to be, because they recognize those barriers. We need to do something else besides what we're doing to make that, to level out that, smooth that road for our students. They have now a very successful electrical apprenticeship program at the university. So these aren't students that are going and receiving college credit in order for a bachelor's degree. These are college students that are going on to become apprentice and journeyman, and that's happening at the university. So the paradigms are shifting. They're changing for a little bit. For some people, Gary, that's a very scary place. Traditionally, we've done this. We're standing on the cliff of this paradigm shift, and that's a crazy place, a scary place to be. But for others, it's an exciting place to be because we know that's the way in order to grow and into the future and meet the needs of our community. So thank you for the question. It was anonymous, but it was a great question.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And Dr. Wilson, I'm going to go ahead and read it for the audience because I don't know that everybody can see it. So there needs to be another session similar to this that includes educators from public institutions in the state. There are huge jumps in logic and argument that need to have an alternative perspective to give students a complete picture. It is a massive generalization to blame what are being called fiefdoms as the inhibitor for, forgive me, for accepting coursework from one provider to another. So.
Absolutely. Agree 100%. I would welcome that opportunity. I even would co-sponsor it because I think a much broader, deeper public conversation is much needed. And people that know me know that if I'm not the smartest person in the room, and if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm sorry. But at the same time, if I'm right, I expect us to be able to have the conversation and do what's in the best interest of students. So I think that's a great question, and I'm absolutely welcome the opportunity.
All right. Well, we got 2 minutes left. Do you want to go around the horn or do you want to just take us out with it, Dr. Wilson?
So I appreciate the opportunity, Gary, and I appreciate Dr. Doolin and Kevin joining on the Morning Scoop. I think the work that we're trying to do in CTEDs, not just at EBIT, but across the state of Arizona, adds value to our statewide in ways that I don't know that necessarily folks often recognize. Some of that's on us as CTEDs, and I'll speak specifically about EBIT. We're the best kept secret in the East Valley, and that it shouldn't be that way. But I do believe we're at a point, as Kevin has said, as a state in which if we're going to become who we expect ourselves to be, it's going to require all of us to work together to make what's possible for our students achievable. EVIT can lean in, other CTEDs can lean in, just as the community colleges can, just as the universities can, just as the privates can, so that we can create a workforce that is second to none in our country. Arizona is poised to have opportunities that many states aren't. And we need to make sure we capture that opportunity, not just for our sake, but for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. And I think CTEDs and EVIT have the ability to lean in and do that.
All right, well, we've run out of time, and I just want to thank the audience for attending this morning. And I want to thank our sponsor, EVIT, and our 4 panelists, Kevin Hines, Dr. Rhonda Doolin, and Dr. Chad Wilson. Dr. Wilson, it's always a pleasure to work with you. And
Thank you,
Kevin,
Gary.
the same. And I'm glad to have met you and been able to do this with you, Dr. Doolin. And
Thank you,
I hope
Gary.
we can do it again.
Thank you. I
So-
appreciate the opportunity, Gary.
All right, thank you, everybody. And
Thank
Take
you. Have
care.
a great day.
Have a good one.